Good afternoon. I'm really glad to see you all on this beautiful sunny day. I am IEN's program manager for climate justice, which I advance through our net zero initiative, but also events like this one. So you've all seen me in your inbox. But it is really a pleasure to introduce our first panel of the day, which will be a case study on Virginia Wesleyan University, and you'll hear from our panelists. They will share their experiences, building consensus to create Virginia Wesleyan's investment policy. So really excited and looking forward to it, and hope you all enjoy. And with that, I will turn it over to Ali.
I think all of us would agree that good governance and a clear strategy is pretty critical to making progress in a unified direction over time. And so I'm really fortunate to have a great panel here who can give you different perspective on how Virginia Wesleyan's done that. The president, one of the trustees, and a student, so definitely an integrated approach. I'm with Brown Advisory, a portfolio manager there, and fortunate to work with Virginia Wesleyan as part of this journey. One of the things that was also said early that I think is really important is that it is a journey, right? I think sometimes in this type of work, the getting too focused on the details can be the perfection can be the enemy of the good, and so. I know we all are united in this room, at least, on the opportunity to be more sustainable, to influence kind of a better world with the assets we manage. I mean, sometimes at Brown, we talk about it as the other 95%. So you're trying to generate around a 5% spend to fund the institution, but how are you using that other 95% to be aligned with the values of your organization? And so I think nothing's as helpful as hearing a specific story from how it's worked in practice. So with that, why don't I let the panelists introduce themselves? And it was suggested by IEN that we do a little icebreaker here. And so what's the one word that you would use to describe the transition that you've been on recently?
Hi, everybody. I'm Scott Miller, president of the university, and we're delighted to have you here in Virginia Beach, where it's always 75 and sunny. How about 75 and sunny? No. Teamwork, and we'll explain more about that in a little bit.
I'm Gary Bonnewell. I'm a class of 79, excuse me, at Virginia Wesleyan. I was also the first alumni to be the board chair, and so I've been on the board. I was calculating it's a little bit over 30 years. I don't think with no interruption, so it's kind of unique. So.
My name's Rowan Stuart, technically senior this year, so excited to be graduating this spring and transitioning into an MBA program here. And for my one word, I would say exciting.
All right, so I think we were going to start with sort of just an overview of Virginia Wesleyan's process over the past few years, because they've really had a lot of sort of great opportunity with the endowment, but also a lot of change. And so as part of that, it's been a significant involvement by both the leadership and the trustees and sort of how to navigate that. So, Gary, you were going to start and also, I think, just set the groundwork for us in terms of the terms we're using.
Yeah, being at a Methodist institution, John Wesley started the movement, which this university is named after, and I think he probably actually set the groundwork for this kind of investing. And do all you can do, and all the means you can do, and all the ways you can do, and all the places you can do, and all the times that you can do, with all the people that you can do for as long as you can do. It's about doing the right thing. And I think that's how we've approached this process here. If you have that one thought in mind, not how much money can you make or how much alpha can you get, but about doing the right thing for all the right people, for the environment, for all these things, then it sets the stage. And that's sort of been a philosophy of the university going back all these years, because it was a group of people that came together and always working for the good of the university. So the culture that we've had here has always been the initial part. Now, I must say, everything I'm saying today is of educational purposes, and it's not to be considered a buy or sell recommendation, and no investment advice is being given by me. Let me just put that last part in.
All right. Okay, so President Miller, why don't you get into the weeds a little bit about this?
Sure, and while the four of us are all different parts of the team, I think you know, Rowan didn't really explain, he's part of the Batten Honors College, and he's one of the 160 scholars in that group that are an elite group of students from all over the world that have come here as a result of this endowment that was provided by a very generous donor. But I also need to introduce 3 other members of the team who are here. Dr. Travis Malone is the Dean of the Batten Honors College. Elizabeth Malcolm is the Director of Sustainability, and she's the person, stand up, Elizabeth, you're always so shy about things. She's the one who sets the agenda for all of us, and we'll talk about our environmental guiding principles. I've been here 8 years, but Elizabeth has been the one who's aligned the priorities, and it has been the wonderful donor support that we've received that has been enabled us to really forward the agenda that she started. My focus, and again, college presidents, when you get them going, could go for 3 hours, and we have only a very select period of time, so they told me keep it to 7 minutes. So I'm going to be very structured in this approach, and hopefully, yeah, we've got some of this up on the screen. My focus will be on the how-to, and then we'll talk a little bit about the nuts and bolts and open the floor up for discussion. I first got involved with what was then the American College and University President's Climate Commitment in 2006. And the original group of 15 formulated the plan, and 35 additional presidents joined them in Washington for the very first meeting. I was in my 2nd presidency at the time, and through involvement down through the years, I've gained momentum that's led me to my career capstone environmental experience here at Virginia Wesleyan in Virginia Beach, which everything has come together beautifully. A beautiful campus in a park-like setting in coastal Virginia with donors who are excited about the environment. Who could ask for more? It was my involvement with ACU PCC and Second Nature in 2006 that first introduced me to George. And at the time, he was with ACU PCC and Second Nature, eventually the vice president, before moving over to be the leader for IEN. And it was his move over to IEN that inspired our interest in moving our endowment to align with a lot of the principles that IEN stands for. I'm uniquely positioned as the only president in the country to have presided over 3 signatory institutions since the founding of the group. In 2015, when I joined Virginia Wesleyan, I was inspired by the location and the commitment to the principles espoused by Second Nature and the Climate Leadership Network. So in 2014, just before my arrival, a donor made a commitment to fund a world-class center for environmental sciences. And if on break, I guess you're going to get to see it maybe during the reception. It's the building out the front door and all the way at the end. It's at the end of the quad. Beautiful, state-of-the-art facility that really sets the tone for us being leaders in the environment. In 2016, the donor committed initial funding to start an honors college in 2017 with a primary focus on environmental issues. In 2018, when we became one of the early members of the Intentional Endowment Network, it was a modest level of support that we had in the endowment, and we were still setting as a priority ESG as something that we aspired to. In 2019, with our friends at Allegheny College in Pennsylvania, Virginia Wesleyan established its version of the environmental guiding principles. And as we all know, presidents change, deans change, boards change, students turn over. The environmental guiding principles are embedded in all the policy and operational activities here on campus, and they withstand the test of time. And this is critically important to us as we discuss the endowment. I mentioned a gift in 2015 to construct a world-class environmental center. The center's 44,000 square feet, features a sophisticated indoor and outdoor learning space that embody science on display and promote hands-on experiences, interactive learning, and interdisciplinary research. While the center is a major benefit to students studying in the environmental sciences, all students from all majors benefit from this magnificent facility. Our recognition as National Conservationist of the Year by the Chesapeake Bay Foundation created widespread visibility and niche building opportunities, It expanded our relationship with 11 regional environmental organizations and provided unmatchable opportunities for students wanting to study in coastal Virginia. So about halfway through the 2-year process of constructing the Environmental Sciences Center, we entered into discussions with the donor about an academic program that might complement this soon-to-be-completed state-of-the-art facility. And the donor suggested that an honors college with a focus on the environment in a location like ours would develop into a national niche program for the university. So after months of developing the model, the donor agreed to fund the program with annual contributions for the first 4 years. The Honors College opened in 2017, coinciding with the opening of the Environmental Sciences Center. The opening was greeted with tremendous success, 30,000 inquiries per year, incredibly high selectivity, and rave reviews from students, parents, and the media. Every student had a focus on the environment no matter what major they were in. Every student had a funded international experience. Every student had a funded leadership experience, mostly in Washington, D.C. So we're proud to have Rowan Stuart, a student from the Batten Honors College, on the panel with us today, and there will be several others that will interact with you during your visit here. By 2021, the success of the program had attracted much attention. The results were convincing. The original donor committed $23.2 million to start an endowment for the program. About 2.5, 2.6, 3 years ago, the donor came back to us and made an additional $60 million gift to create a total endowment of $80.3 million for the Batten Honors College. So we have 160 students. 80 of them are on full tuition scholarships. 80 of them are on 3/4 tuition scholarships. And they also get funded experiences in a foreign country, experience the environment in coastal Virginia. 3 conditions of the gift. The gift would remain anonymous, the donor would. The $80.3 million for the endowment of the Honors College was set as a guarantee that the mission of the Honors College would focus on the environment. And third, that all endowment funds would be invested in an environmentally friendly way. So Brown Advisory of Baltimore, Maryland, and a member of IEN agreed to invest our funds utilizing the network's checklist to align investment practices with institutional mission through sustainable investing. Shortly after investing the initial $80.3 million with Brown, our board voted unanimously to move the entirety of our endowment to Brown Advisory for environmentally friendly investing. So that meant over $120 million is now in our portfolio with Brown Advisory, and everything is being moved from a former investment manager to this new endowment fund with the specifications that as we transition, it'll go to environmentally friendly investing. Since then, Brown Advisory has also made a $50,000 gift to start the Brown Advisory Student Managed Investment Fund. There's a dedicated finance and investment lab in Clark Hall for students to use in this capacity. There's also a corresponding class in which experts from this field, like Ali, like Gary, like David Kaufman, former board chair, and many others can share their knowledge and best practices with our students. So it's been an exciting time at Virginia Wesleyan as we've worked to put this responsible investing aspect of our sustainability goals into action. And I thank Elizabeth for having the vision. I thank our donor for providing the funds, and I thank our entire team for the roles that they have had in putting this together. I'll stop and let you lead us through.
I know everybody, I think the student perspective is really important to why we all do a lot of the work we do. And so Rowan, I'll get to you in just 1 second, but I think one thing that might be helpful for the audience in advance is really the investment policy statement part, because that's really critical to how you're actually defining what you're doing. And so, what we've seen work well with a lot of institutions is kind of tackling that as a small working group and then moving that to the larger committee. And Gary, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the approach at Virginia Wesleyan, because I think it modeled after that.
Yeah, again, because we've always had a very collegial board, I think it made it easy. The directive by the donor on part was clear, but the remaining part that was that another advisor was not so clear. We We wanted to make sure as a fiduciary we did everything that was required by us. The first gift was sort of directed, but the other part was not, and so I think that was where we probably spent more time coming up with some of the difficult heavy lifting is, should we move it, how much should we move, when should we move? You know, the investment policy statement, I think, came about methodically. It was, you know, part, you know, we hired, you know, an outside investment office to handle things, but our guidance in how that gets done is very important. But the cumulative part, and I think that's the other part, is do you want all your investments this way, you know, in one advisor, or do you want to leave them the way they were with two sides? For me, that was the harder part, was to make that decision. But I think it was the cumulative aspect of how it was going to be managed, how the investment policy statement came about, and then it was easier to say, yes, this makes more sense to combine it.
And that came from the process that Elizabeth really led on the formulation of the environmental guiding principles for the entire institution. And our friends at Allegheny College assisted us. As far as we know, they may be the first in the business to have that embedded in all their policies. I don't know that I've heard of anybody else. Have you, Elizabeth? But that touches all areas of the institution, and the financial side of it came as a result of those environmental guiding principles. And I might also add an advertisement for IEN, because our donor had seen the materials that we share. You know, you get all those emails all the time that George and Nicole are sending out. Beautiful graphics and everything, but we share them rather extensively. And, you know, our donor said there's something to think about in the materials that they're sending, and it led us down this path. So kudos to IEN also.
And I'll say, as the outside manager, having those principles so readily available was a tool for us in terms of understanding the university's values and objectives. So I think the work done to document all of that was really helpful in articulation of the investment policy statement. So Rowan, I mean, you know, it's about you and the next generation, and how, you know, how we can support scholars like you, and also sort of the world going forward. Why don't you talk a little bit about your perspective on this?
Yeah, great. So I'd say the majority of the role from the student perspective has been through the IEN Corporate Engagement Challenge and through the recently established fund. So I'll be speaking about the IEN Corporate Engagement Challenge first. In my freshman year, myself and Connor Merck were approached by Dr. Malone about the IEN Challenge and how we thought that it would be in line with the values of the Batten Honors College with the environmental stewardship that we wish to practice. So Connor Merck and I sat down and thought, well, how is the best way to go about this? And we started by putting together a diverse team of students. So it was students of political science, it was students of business, sustainability, data science, all these individuals which could take this very broad topic of environmentalism and hone it into their individual niches so that we could have an appropriate look at whatever company we chose. And in the first year of our involvement in the competition, we decided to look at Ford Motor. So we had quite a few different ways that we thought we could look at it, but of course we sat down first and thought, what are we trying to accomplish? What do we know? And more importantly, what don't we know? So the consensus that our team came to is that we were attempting to demonstrate that it's not just incumbent upon these companies to represent environmentalism, but that's eminently desirable for them from a financial standpoint. And once we had that established, we were able to look at our individual niches. So we had the political science individual looking at the company's governments, our sustainability individual looking at the environmental science, the data scientist taking all the research that we had combined and finding out what we could draw from it, and of course any other relevant portions for business and finance and whatever other expertise we could gather from the numerous professors and mentors that helped us throughout the program. And through all of that work, we found that while we came in very confident that we knew a lot, we know a lot about the environment, we know a lot about our individual subjects, we knew very little. It's one of those things where, you know, we came in very confident that we knew our niches incredibly well, especially within this space, given the image of the Batten Honors College. But to have the opportunity to have the practical knowledge, not just in an educational setting, and find out what's relevant in the field, what's relevant to these companies, what do we need to do to make the progress that we'd like to see, and how can the endowment benefit from that? So once we were able to find that, we spent a lot of time doing our research on Ford and finding, well, here's what we didn't know, what do we need to know to gather it? And once we found that information, we put together a comprehensive shareholder engagement strategy and that was to engage Ford Motor on a recycling program. So at the time they were establishing a new gigafactory in Tennessee, we thought that it would be an effective plan to establish a lithium-ion battery recycling plant specifically targeted to electric vehicles. Justified the expenditures for it, tried to draw up revenue and profit streams, and demonstrate that this presented a significant opportunity for them to protect against risk, right? Very unstable market, and have an in-house system where they could have access to this lithium and all these different metals would be beneficial to the company. And then after the corporate engagement challenge had concluded, we actually wound up winning that year, which we were, shocked by, extraordinarily proud collectively. But I had the opportunity to come and speak to the Board of Trustees on the work we did and how that could be represented within what we're doing and within the principles of IEN.
Who were some of the competitors in that?
Some of the competitors school-wise?
Yeah.
Yes.
If I recall correctly, Yale had entered, Berkeley, and NYU Stern, many other schools, Bard, Arizona State. The list goes on and on and on. It was very lovely to hear their insights as well throughout the whole process. And had the privilege again of competing against them last year, where along with my co-lead, who's actually here today, Jessica Wilson, we wound up being a finalist again last year. So very proud of the team. And that wound up transitioning us. Thank you. So after we had these successes of the team, the $50,000 fund came to mind. And that came after I had the opportunity of explaining what we were doing to the Board of Trustees within our first year. And so far we've seen the footsteps. Where are we going to go? Are we going to follow the path that we've set out for ourselves? Right now, it is in the elementary state where we have this consensus from the environmental standpoint. We know what our alignment is within our own organization and within the institution. And of course, we're learning our expertise and learning how we can better develop it. So right now we're at that basic point of learning, well, what do endowments prefer mostly? Because we found what we prefer as students and what we'd like to see for companies and what might benefit them, but what's going to benefit our institution overall. So we've spent a little bit of time looking at basic things like DuPont analysis and learning how are we going to find appropriate values for these companies, reading 10Ks, I know that was a very important thing mentioned before, and just going over a lot of that basic stuff so that once we have that, we can move on to our more complex portions and find out, well, what exactly are we going to benefit from in investing within these companies? Is this something that's going to benefit the institution, not just during our tenure here, but for the foreseeable future? And one of the best parts of that program is that we're going to have people coming in to speak to us, where it's not just going to be something where we're reading books and we're gaining all this knowledge through interacting with one another in the classroom, but having experts in the field such as yourselves to come in and speak to us and say, well, this is what we're looking at. This is what's important in the field now, and being able to take those insights and not only just use them in our own lives, but most importantly, use them for that fund.
Yeah. Pretty impressive. I might add that Rowan has been an inspiration in so many things on campus, also part of the Ethics Bowl team that has won state championship a couple times. But I would be remiss if I didn't say the donor is not just giving money to us to invest and then forgetting about us. Maynard Schaus was developing a master's program in environmental studies. And because these students that have been recruited through this wonderful endowment fund are so self-motivated and so bright, many of them finish in 3 years. And when the donor set up the fund, it was to be a 4-year residential college. And Maynard's idea was, well, why don't we still hold true to them on the 4th year and encourage them to stay here and work on a master's degree in one of our master's programs. So Maynard designed a master's program in environmental studies, but we also have 5 other master's programs, and our first cohorts this year are coming out of the 3 years in the Batten Honors College and moving right into the 4th year with our donor's blessing that the 4th year be used for graduate study here. So what a wonderful program.
Yeah, something I'm excited to take advantage of myself.
Good.
Well, I think we're out of time, and we're going to get to small groups, but I'll just, obviously this is a really integrated approach. We didn't get into kind of the actual measurement of the portfolio, which I know. We did. Okay. Well, so let me point you all to one thing that I know is probably one of the greatest tools IEN provides, and that's their roadmap on this kind of journey. And we use something similar, kind of discovery. What is for something like environmentally sustainable mean to the institution expression? What do you actually write in the investment policy statement? Then actually reporting and tracking, how are you doing according to your defined targets? And then improvement, right? So how are you measuring kind of, are we moving in the direction we want? Because, you know, a lot of us have private investments in the portfolio or managers that aren't marketable, and so there are things happening beneath the surface on a that you don't have clarity to on a daily basis. And so all of that has to be kind of thought through and part of the framework as you move on this journey. But I think what
and I think, Ali, if I don't mind, that's the, before we look at performance and a lot of other things, that's the one thing we sort of start with, is looking at, you know, how are we tracking? And I think that's a very important part, because it helps center you in the right way, you know, because performance gets well, it's now moved down to the last item, but it used to be at the top item. But I think it helps center you when you know you're doing good, when you're doing the right thing.
yeah.
And you know, one thing, and I'll do my advertisement for Brown Advisory here from a different perspective also, is they've become partners with us, not just as our outsourced endowment officers, not just as donors to develop a student investment fund, but they also have a wealth management division. And a number of their clients in the wealth management division have been inspired by the success of the partnership between the university and Brown Advisory. And we're delighted that their wealth management clients have shown an interest financially in growing the endowment and in other programs on our campus. So that's a teamwork thing from you all and us that has worked out very well also.
I mean, I just, you know, oh, go ahead with your question.
I was just curious when you talk about what do you want to measure? What's important to each institution? So could you give a few examples of some of the different metrics that you're measuring?
Yeah, so again, environmental.
Repeat the question.
Did you hear the question? It was sort of like, what are you measuring is the question, and not as elegant of a way as you expressed it. But so because environmental sustainability is one of the key pillars of the Batten Honors College, that has really risen to be one of the top criteria that we're thinking about. And so, you know, when you think, I mean, I think most of the people in the room are aware, but you have sort of different tools you can take. There's exclusionary, and then there's proactive engagement. And we use both. So we're tracking things like carbon emissions on the, you know, wanting to ensure that the portfolio is making progress there, and then also proactive engagement. And so one of the things, you know, that might be investing in sort of energy transition businesses or proxy voting, or ways that we engage with companies to make sure their disclosure is becoming more transparent and fair, and that they're actually moving toward targets. And our firm is a little bit unique in that we have an open architecture approach where we're utilizing external managers, but we also have internal equity and fixed income strategies. So we have people doing individual company research that can provide their own metrics on sort of what the companies and an external manager, you know, how they're ranking. So not only is it sort of the quantitative analysis, but it's the feedback from actually engaging with that individual company on what they're doing proactively. And I mean, I think, you know, just yesterday or 2 days ago, there was an article in the New York Times about outflows from ESG funds. And it's like, you know, it's inflows, outflows. There's a lot of noise in the space, as everybody knows. I think, you know, how we approach it is really like smart investing. I mean, you just look at what has happened over the past few years with supply chain disruption. And our companies that were more sustainably aligned, that had broader diversification in their supply chain networks, for example, are ones that performed better during sort of the disruption of COVID or Russia's invasion of Ukraine and so forth. And so we really think that, you know, the data and the work that we're doing to analyze the company's sustainability and their move toward being kind of a positive contributor to society is going to generate stronger performance over time. But that said, we hold ourselves to a really high standard of tracking the manager's performance to every other similar strategy in the universe. So we're not trying to beat the other sustainable strategies. We're trying to meet all the relevant strategies in that space.
I just tag on there. I think when you think about Virginia Wesleyan, you know, the environment is just part of our DNA. The Joan Brock room that we're in is also the Brock Environmental Center for Chesapeake Bay Foundation. We have an environmental research vessel at the Virginia Aquarium, where we have a lake over here, we have the ocean over there, we have state parks. I mean, we're just in the midst of this, and so we can't, you know, turn our head without encountering the importance of honoring the environment.
So I think it was Andrew maybe brought up this notion of, you know, folks who are focused on ESG or have a longer time horizon, right? We're looking out 20 years, not the next 3. So I'm curious, sort of when you revisited your investment policy statement, did you sort of change, make explicit or whatever your expectations for sort of the period over which you were going to evaluate the managers?
I don't think we've changed. It's a conversation that comes up every meeting because we've got to provide cash flow for these scholarships. So, you know, we've sort of got weights on two sides of which one's more important. And the fact that we're in the early stages, we were also given cash initially, so it made it easier to transition, I'll call it. We're still on the runway, I would call it. We're not where we want to be. We haven't allocated out on places we want to allocate to. So come back to me in 5 years. Yeah. I can answer it better.
And you know, we also decided, and that this was with our friends at Brown, you know, we could have jerked everything out of our former investment plan and instantly put it in to new investments that met the criteria, or we could phase it periodically so that we didn't take huge losses. And we've been very strategic over the 2.5, I guess it's 2.5 years, isn't it? About now? 2.5 years. So that we are you know, it didn't all happen at once. It has to be phased in so that we don't take losses well.
Yeah, and I'll just say, I mean, we're still, you know, I think as fiduciaries investing for the long term. You know, it's a perpetual pool of capital. So the time horizon is, you know, meet the needs of today for the university, but make sure it's preserved for future generations.
Ali, I mean, we're about 85% to target on our asset allocation. Is that about right?
Yeah, I mean, the real challenge for everybody is, you know, when your endowment doubles and you have a private equity target, it takes a while to get there. So that's really, the private investments are what take longer to invest.
But the key for us as an institution has been the environmental guiding principles. Because whether we have a business major, a religion major, a teacher education major, everything is focused on the environmental guiding principles. And, you know, again, presidents change, deans change, trustees change, students change, professors change, but those environmental guiding principles are now embedded in all of our policy documents and in our mode of operandi. I think he's been waiting for a question now for a couple times around.
Question about the timeline for creating the investment policy statement, and then were there any challenges with the Board of Trustees in getting approval of the update? Not everyone is going to be an investment expert like Gary, so how does that work? Because I'd love to know for other universities that haven't done this yet, what kind of expectations could be shared with them. And
let me start, and then I'll hand it off to you. Sure. So first of all, I go back once again to the environmental guiding principles, because every year we restate them, we include them in the board materials, and the environment became a priority, and that's Elizabeth's agenda that she's had here for a long time. So when we have a donor who comes along and says, I'm making this size gift, and my preference is that it be handled in an environmentally friendly way, it made it easier for us. It wasn't just coming out of the blue. It was something that we had been talking about, and you know, Elizabeth, when I called her to tell her what the donor did, she was like in shock, because she said she'd been talking about it for 10 years and had never, or more, and there had never been any progress in it. So, you know, the initial gift from the donor moved us one part of the way, and Gary and our Board of Trustees actively embraced that and supported it, because we had been it wasn't just something new, we had been talking about it.
Yeah, I think it's, again, part of the culture of the university. Most of our trustees, up until the last 5 years, were very local. So you knew each other, you spent time with each other, you socialized with each other. So you had a familiarity, which is different now that we've got trustees all over the country. So it made it a little bit easier to work together. But then again, part of the culture was once the committee had resolved its issues, going to the full board, it wasn't rubber stamped, it never is. We've had a couple of trustees that always ask very piercing questions. And as long as you can answer them, they won't fight you on them. But I mean, again, it's I just give it a lot of it to the culture of the university.
And again, I mean, I just have seen it work best when those types of questions come up that make the committee meeting or like an approval or disapproval challenging. Sometimes it's getting sort of the small working group together to review and get data that's helpful to them, and then use that, you know, because sometimes it's just hard to get from point A to point B without some work in between, you know.
We have a very corporate-looking board, and when all of a sudden the endowment goes from 50-some million to 120 million, the most popular committee to be on became finance and endowment. There's so much, I mean, we learn something every time. It's an educational process too, but there's something that's significant, transformational for the institution, and heavy participation there.
Go ahead. It's okay.
Oh, we got two.
Thank you for a great conversation. I'm particularly interested in the relationship between fundraising and endowment strategy. You both, I think the president board chair mentioned that because of your commitment to the environment, you've been able to secure some additional fundraising opportunities that might not otherwise be available. I'm paying particular attention to the trend in philanthropy, where philanthropists are beginning to invest in endowments rather than in programmatic dollars or dollars for other capital. So I wonder, sort of, as you're engaging that fundraising group, are they excited about the pivot to ESG? Are they concerned that it may lead to a longer horizon of returns and therefore have hesitancy in sort of committing to the endowment model for fundraising approaches? Are you seeing a balance between the two? Just interested in your thoughts there.
So the genius in all this was a man who was president back in the 1980s named Lambeth Clark. And he was a development-oriented president who had come here to lead a young institution. And as the president of that young institution, he went out to all the corporate CEOs in the area and said, I want you to be on our board of trustees. And they all said, thanks, but I'm on the board at William & Mary, I'm on the board at UVA, I'm on the board at Virginia Tech. Without hesitation, he said, what about your wife? And I know we had the conversation about women in philanthropy and investment. This is one of those inspiring stories, because there were 8 to 10 women in the 1980s, at a time when women were not really in leadership positions or on boards, who came on the board here, fell in love with this place, and as the decades passed, their commitment to this institution, even though only one of the group, one of maybe 8, attended this institution, they fell in love with the place. So as they matured as philanthropists, that love that they had for 30 years has paid a major giving dividend to the institution now. And I think the last sort that we did of our capital campaign, of course there are 8 major donors in that, 92% of the money had come from female philanthropists.
As you know, men tend to die earlier.
I wasn't going to say that, Gary.